Robinson, and I am the Gnostic Syncretist. Thank you for joining me tonight. My channel is devoted to a study of the esoteric and occult nature of reality and the agendas to use the occult laws of reality against the rest of us, the masses, to subvert and alter and modify our societal norms as well as our states of consciousness to gain large-scale advantages over the rest of us. I also want to always reiterate that everyone is welcome on this channel, no matter your background or your belief system. Anyone that is actively seeking in the esoteric or occult nature of our reality is always welcome on this channel. So once again, thank you for joining me tonight, and please like and subscribe, and at the end, share this video. So on our last podcast, we talked about what has been called the war on the two sexes, the war generated between them in our current day and age, and how there is the occult engineering of the dark neo-feminist movement and agenda to facilitate this war upon the sexes, this war between them and among the male and female humans in our species. So it is also designed to create a sort of psychospiritual inversion of energy archetypes on the four subtle bodies of males and females. And it has, and to a large degree, been somewhat successful in reversing the energy roles and archetypal expression of male and females in our societal relationships and our family arrangements and our, so to speak, mating habits and reproductive rights, reproductive construction of how we see and choose to become attracted to another individual of the opposite sex and engage in either family creation or reproduction between the two. So the dark occult elite, the sorcerers of consciousness, have long been at work in the last 100 years to absolutely reverse the polarities between males and females, the role reversal, energy archetypal reversal, and the concentration of which energy is expressed and through which subtle bodies are used for that expression. There is a negative and positive polarity structure for the subtle bodies of males and females, and they find their expression in kind of a reverse patterning, so that males and females are, in a very strong sense, the absolute energetic opposite to the other sex, so that they both have all four, but one will be positive, one will be negative, depending on which plane and which subtle body we're referring to. So this has also been called, and I call it, the dark occult's long war against the divine feminine as well as the divine masculine energy archetypes, because those two archetypes of the divine feminine and divine masculine energies and how they naturally express themselves through the individual are absolutely the pillars and foundational structures of not only our interchange of relationships and marriage rituals, and who we choose to become engaged with in marriage, as well as, even more significantly, the two types of divine feminine and masculine energies and how they are concentrated in the individual are when done in the ideal way and done properly in equilibrium and in kind of a conjoined balance amongst themselves between the two, they're the foundational pillar of our entire civilization. And the nature of that relationship of energy is what drives progress and what drives our spiritual evolution along its trajectory. And if you start to modify that or alter that or even totally invert it, you will completely rebalance and discombobulate the entirety of the spiritual evolution structure, at least on the physical plane. You will do it on other planes as well, but it'll be most obviously manifested in the way we choose relationships and the way we become attracted to one another, the way we engage in creation, family creation. So, what has been done by these dark occult elite, as I spoke about in my last video, is this dark neo-feminist agenda, which has nothing to do with, once again, I will reiterate, the original type of feminism, which was utterly necessary, long overdue, and was a rebalancing of the energy and archetypal roles of male and females in our Western societies, which was just so long overdue. However, as all good things tend to get hijacked by the dark occult elites of the, you know, upper class occultocracy, as I like to call them, they hijacked the original feminist movement and altered it and redirected it over the decades since the early 1900s up until now in the 21st century and 2020s, to where it is no longer at all related to original feminism. Original feminism was seeking to harmonize and balance out the absolute inequalities and disequilibrium that existed between males and females in our societies. Women were being, in a certain sense, mentally and basically psychically, mentally repressed and, so to speak, quarantined in the emotional and the spiritual spheres, while men were dominating specifically in the intellectual or mental and the uh, very materialistic sphere of, of whatever you would call that, the materiality, world, world creation, politics, economics, all those worldly manifestations of higher principles that tend to grow, progress, or regress our societal frameworks as a civilization. So, without a rebalancing and a reharmonization early 100 years ago, there we would never have made any progress whatsoever. It would have been completely just residing in total stagnation with the other half of our entire race essentially fully repressed and unable to offer their wonderful benefits to the cultural creation aspects of our reality, as well as to rebalance out our overextension and overconcentration of masculine and left brain energies within our civilizational structures and institutional structures, so that it was absolutely became necessary to do both all those things to rebalance it. Of course, what typically happens is these dark occultists never let a good thing go to waste, and they have in essence fully hijacked what was originally a very beneficial and spiritual feminist movement and spiritual progressive energy change in the Western world to become the exact opposite of what it was intended to do originally 100 years ago, which was reharmonization and balancing out of the two types. Men were over domineering and women were, overly suppressed and repressed in their energetic expression of how we run our societies, how we run our civilization. So after they, took off in the feminist movement and they got the right to vote, they got all these different rights, they got to become much less than the second class citizens they had always been for centuries under what I would simply refer to as the male dominated patriarchal Judeo Christian paradigm and religions, which sought universally, and includes Islam, to fully subjugate women to a male only deity conceptual framework in their religion, which was fully imbalanced. and utterly at disharmony with the true nature of our reality, which is that there is only the deity of no gender, but with the existing potentiality of both energy types, male and female, positive and negative, within its essence, and only a balanced concept in our spiritual movements and our spiritual institutions of male and female working together, male and female balancing each other out, and the concept of a deity that is neither male nor female, but the very essence of both male and female, the one, the true logos, and the androgynous deity that is the deity always referred to in theosophy and anthroposophy and the ancient mystery schools and Gnosticism and Neoplatonism and all the rest of them. They always had a harmonized and balanced concept of the absolute deity, the God of the entirety of reality, not some sort of tribal male only, creator God that, chosen basically males to run society, to be the priest class, and to subvert their control over not only women and society, but also over the natural world, and to create a lot of the very, very paradigms that have driven us into a lot of our errors and gross inconsistencies today with this male only energy, this over concentration of male dominated energy type has driven our society into an absolute destruction of the natural world, a repression of the animal kingdom, the mass production and mass murder of the animal kingdom on a scale that is just truly horrible to behold. I mean, the estimates are just monumentally horrifying. The amount of butchering of animals we do simply just to feed ourselves, and there's no energetic reciprocity between us and the animal kingdom at all at this point. And I've definitely heard many Christians, specifically males, Christians that are male, and very strong Christians state when I say that we shouldn't treat animals like this. They go, well, God says in the Bible that that we are there to rule over them, and He gave that to us, and we named them, and they're basically our property, which is a total misinterpretation of the intended nature of those scriptures and what it was really referring to. We are really supposed to be the custodians of the animal kingdom, of all the kingdoms that are beneath us. We are their protectors and their guardians, and we are here to nurture those kingdoms into their higher spiritual evolutionary paths, just like we're to do it to ourselves. So the dark neo-feminist agenda and this psychospiritual inversionary tactics to turn men into essentially women on on several certain levels. They want to emasculate men on the physical level and repress them on the intellectual level, while also simultaneously over nurturing the emotional side of men, as well as the undernourishing on top of that of their already lacking spiritual perception and energy, which is the absolute inversion of what needs to be occurring for men in our day and age, which needs to be men need to maintain their high energy mentally, their energy type that gives them a positive polarity to the mental plane, and maintain their physical positive polarity on the material plane, which has always been like that for men. That's how our structure, our spiritual structure, is created, and that's how it was made. We are very mental and we are very physical, but we lack emotional and spiritual understanding, perception, and general knowledge, because we are basically negative on those planes, which means we are much more receptive. So the spiritual evolutionary path forward would be to maintain the two we already have and to invigorate and vitalize the emotional and spiritual nature of our being as men, so that we can, reach women on their plane of existence and those on those subtle bodies. We have such a lack of emotional understanding. We have such a spiritual, you know, you know, we are spiritually bereft of knowledge as men. Our perception is quite a bit weaker than females, and to reharmonize and to balance out all of that, we have to concentrate on both those planes, on the astral body and on the spiritual body. Our mental and physical body just need to be simply maintained at what was their current strength. Of course, they're being, torn down and reconstructed into a much weaker form currently under the dark occult agendas. So, on the opposite end, women are now taking on a much more masculine and dominating role. They are, in essence, becoming masculinized. They are, unfortunately, becoming to be in the worst ways like the men we have been in the past, to where they have, many partners. They have an overabundance and overused, overutilized sense of sexual energy, and it's become fully acceptable by our society to engage in that type of behavior. It was already unacceptable for men to do it, and now women do it as well. To where the family unit and which is the pillar of our society, mainly through the divine feminine archetype, has been totally subverted and perverted by this neo-feminist agenda to supposedly empower women to be like men. Well, that's not empowering if you become like men. That is simply a warping and a twisting of the natural female energy type into one that it was never meant to be, to one that is inverted, and totally destroys the divine feminine in most women. I shouldn't say most, in a lot of women, to where they're not only confused, but they're totally imbalanced and, you know, overly energetic in multiple spheres now, when they were simply not energetic enough in those spheres. Now they've been repressed in the emotional and spiritual spheres almost entirely, and they instead have gained the physical and the mental overbearing concentration of energy that the males have always exhibited throughout the last many centuries, going back thousands of years, really. So instead of reharmonizing and simply invigorating the spheres of their subtle bodies that they were lacking energy in, they have instead completely reversed that, and they have lost their connection to the emotional and spiritual planes at the expense of gaining some sort of power, a masculine form of power in the mental and physical material plane, which has just destroyed the entire, structural framework of the male and female relationship, and obliterated the pillars of Western civilization, to where, the reproductive rates are going down, the fertility rates are going down, the divorce rate is going up, the long-term marriage rates have been totally, you know, reduced from what, say, my parents had. They always were in long-term marriages, like lasting for decades practically, and that has never been. That's not the case at all anymore. And so, what you've done is you have perverted the divine feminine in women, and you have weakened and emasculated the divine masculine in the men, because you don't want the divine masculine in men. You want that to be repressed, because those divine masculine men are the ones who will resist any sort of authoritarianism that comes from the dark occult elite and their, transhumanist agendas. So this is this has been a long war on the divine feminine, and this long war has been directed and researched and socially engineered through propaganda, media, celebrity culture, talking heads, magazines, every movies, you know, TikTok, everything has been designed to destroy the sacred feminine at the expense of the woman. They don't even realize it. They think they've been empowered. And so this form of ostensible female empowerment is really actually the full-on destruction of the sacred feminine principles within the women that have fallen for this propaganda and this mass sociocultural engineering by dark occultists. So, once again, I would like to reiterate that the dark neo-feminist agenda and the occult war on human connection and human intimacy and human relationships, on marriage, on the family unit, and on the very pillars of our Western civilization and its traditions, is utterly and completely designed to destroy male and female emotional connection, to destroy men, and to turn them into weak and absolutely subservient and controllable beings to both the females and to the elite's agendas for technocratic transhumanism and global totalitarianism. They must destroy the man, and they must utilize the female being, the female human of our race, to utterly recondition, repattern, and re-engineer the male sociocultural dynamic and constitution. The very nature of the way they act in our societies, the very framework upon which their own divine masculinity is based must be fully and utterly transformed into one of total subservience, into a slave mentality, into an emasculated individual and being who will simply go along with whatever they need to make sure that they are able to reproduce and to have a mate. And so if you alter women, men will simply follow. And the mass inception of novel and new degenerate forms of behavior on both of the sexes has been created through mass propaganda, mass media, and mass social engineering through the Western propaganda arm of the occult elite. So let there be no mistake that if people don't wake up and recognize this on both sides of both the male and females in Western society, there will be no real turning back. Infertility will continue to rise. Marriage will continue to dissolve. The family will become, a thing of the past, essentially. And reproduction will be only for those who are willing to fall in line with the new normal. And that means a culturally dominating female paradigm, one that is absolutely not nurturing and not growing and not morally imbuing the next generation with the spiritual principles and ethical forthrightness that is absolutely necessary to progress the spiritual evolution of humanity forward. It will become a disharmonic and fully degenerated and devolved human race, because the divine feminine is the absolute pillar of our society and is the absolute pillar of the human race. The man is only as good as his woman is, as the saying goes. that she will make you a better man. Well, she can also make you a much worse man if they make them worse first and you follow simply to have a mate. So, the divine feminine is the key. Divine masculine, at this point, needs to rise up and protect the divine feminine from the absolute assault and onslaught upon that principle and everything that goes along with the sacred mother, the divine mother that nurtures the entirety of the human race towards its spiritual evolution by ingraining morality and, family and intimacy and, courage into the young children that they are charged with raising. The men also help, and it takes two, obviously, but this mass occult engineering is absolutely permeating the entirety of Western culture right now, and so many people don't know that they're even falling for it at all. They don't have a clue. They see the new norms, the new what's popularized on the media, on TikTok, on Instagram, and in celebrity culture and popular culture through all the media outlets and movies and everything else, in that milieu, cultural milieu, as just the next thing. They don't question it. They don't give it a critique. They don't critically think about whether or not this is making you a worse or a better individual. They simply react and totally reactionary. And it's up to the feminine, the female, the women of our societies to garner some serious social, cultural, and spiritual perception about what they're being fed by our society. What cultural concepts are totally degenerating the divine feminine and all of them that fall for the propaganda. So it's, in my opinion, it's up to the men to help them see it, and it's up to the women to make sure that our society remains, or can go back to, a moral, spiritual framework for its progress and evolution. For otherwise, we will basically probably lose to this technocratic transhumanist agenda, because the women are the absolute pillar. I mean, the male is in there as well, but the female is the pillar of civilization. And if the pillar falls, the rest of the house does so as well. It's a house of cards based on the divine feminine. And the divine masculine has been failing her in their guardianship and their protection and their dissemination of what's actually going on, if they can see it, to the women around them, to hope that they can see how they're being manipulated and molded and re-engineered to be the destroyers of the very sacred things they were charged with creation to uphold, maintain, and to nurture in our race, our entire human race. And all of us must exhibit the courage to not only